Welcome to the Accidental Experts podcast. I'm your host, Bryce Hamilton. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a child and family therapist. I have been in practice for over 15 years, and I'm also a mom of 4. So I know the challenges both professionally and personally. I'm so glad that you're here today to grow your parenting toolbox. Please come as you are and be ready to learn. My goal is to make you the accidental expert so that you can raise healthy humans. Hi, welcome back. I'm so glad you're with us today. So we are going to be talking about a topic that I think is important for everyone. We're going to be talking about embracing change with Dr. Darnell, and he is going to be talking to us about how to raise kids who can handle, navigate, and maybe even appreciate change. With that, let's get to Dr. Darnell.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about how to raise kids who can embrace change. And I think adults might need a message on this too.
Right. I agree. I mean, raising children, especially teenagers, I'm still learning how to embrace change.
Yes. Right. And it's like some days they're doing this and other days they're doing that. And you're like, your best friend is this person and now it's somebody
Right.
else. And we're really into baseball and now we're into football. And
Right.
I'm gonna go to college to do this and now I'm gonna do that, or I'm not going to college. And yes, I mean so many changes, right?
Agreed. Agreed. Learning to be flexible and adaptable. And one of the things that I have discovered even more recently, right, is it's okay not to be perfect, and that sucks. Being able to sit in that. Um, it's kind of eye opening, right? I mean, even today, I mean, my son turned 17 years old today, right? So
Nice.
I was sitting here scrolling through pictures, and I remember when he first came out, I was like,
Yes.
and here it is, 17 years later. It's just like, whoa, 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 right? And then so all the times where I feel like I didn't do something right, or I didn't do this enough, I didn't do this enough. But I look back at all the pictures, like, well, you know what, we did a lot, and at 17, he's not going to be the way he was when he was 7 years old. I always want to be up under daddy, right?
Yes.
It's different. And I have to change that too. The relationship is starting to change. It's like, how do I have, in a sense, adult relationships with my children?
Yeah.
That's rough. It's a change for me.
Yes. Yeah. So true. I mean, I think, yes, we're evolving all the time
Mhm.
as adults, as
Yeah.
kids, right? And we're going through different developmental periods, right? And
Mhm.
even adults are, right? Like
Right.
we haven't gotten it all figured out just yet.
No, no, you're absolutely right. But yeah, I'm excited to be here. I'm
Yes.
excited to get this conversation going.
Yes. Okay. So let's jump into it. So,
Okay.
what do you think? Kind of like there's some kids in life
Uh-huh.
or just people in life, but especially talking about raising kids who are able to embrace change. But like, there's some kids who seem to just adapt to change so
Right.
much more readily
Right.
than other kids. What do you think it is about some people that are able to adapt to that and others that are more resistant? Like, what do you think is the background of that dynamic?
Yeah. That's a great question, right? And that's something really reviewing these questions, something I start pondering and considering myself, because having two teenage children, like I said, my son just turned 17 today, and my daughter is 15, and they're polar opposites. Where my son is kind of like easy, kind of go with the flow, where my daughter is like resistant to change, and and I always tell her like, um, if you're first, if she's big into athletics and sports, if you don't go down that path, you're going to be a defense attorney because you will argue everything. And she's just resistant, and it's something that I have continue to learn how to communicate with her, because I don't want to say she's stubborn or hard-headed, because in a sense she's very similar to me, and
Mhm.
how I was always questioning, inquisiting things or inquiring about things.
Yeah.
um, but what happens, I think, is a lot of different dynamics happen, right? So the temperament of parents, I kind of reflect back, okay, um, what is it about me that has influenced her throughout the years, right? And how have I, in a sense, encouraged um, freedom speech, so to speak, to the point where it backfires on me, where she's telling me everything that she wants to tell me, things that she shouldn't be telling me, right? And then when I'm trying to redirect her, um, it may be a little bit more challenging because of just the relationship, whether it be um, just very more lax, and that's something I'm learning how to try to tighten up myself with my own teenage daughter, because, I can be a whole lot more lenient for my son, and, the natural consequences, and okay, he can learn to change that way. Whereas my daughter is like, okay, well, you're going to give me an inch, I'm going to take a mile. Right. And sometimes it's like, maybe I shouldn't have done that. And I'm starting to realize now, like, man, I could have did this differently. I could have done this differently. And maybe should be a little bit more, um, open-minded when it comes to certain changes, especially things that she doesn't agree with. But if
Yeah.
something she doesn't agree with, she is like adamant, nope, this is how it's going to be. And that's been a process. I mean, even, for me now as a parent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I agree, because I have 4 kids, and as the audience probably knows, but I'll review their ages. I have 13, 8, 6, and 3. And
Whew,
all of them are incredibly different people, like
yeah.
so different in personality. And there are things about them that I find are very similar to me, and things that are very different, and things that
Right.
are very much like my husband. And so,
Yeah.
it's so funny to
Yeah.
have these different things, but I think they challenge us. And in some ways, kids are a mirror to
Hmm.
us, right? Of showing us what we need to change, and
Yes.
great things about,
Right.
our personality, of like, wow, you're really strong willed. Like, I love that you believe something fiercely, right?
Right.
And it's great when it's, an adult skill, but
Hmm.
hard when you're parenting it. And I find,
Right.
like, I remind myself, like, this will be a really great skill for them one day, right? I
Right.
don't want to change that part, but how do I parent to that
Right.
part of being very, like, strong-willed? Or sometimes some of my kids are too easy to give up, and
Right.
they'll be like, "Okay, well, I'll just do it your way." And I'm like, "No, no, no, no,
Yeah.
right? Like, no one's opinion is more valid than anyone else's." Like, and
Yeah.
so it's like that balance. But I think you're right. It's parenting, right? What we bring to the table. It's also what they've experienced. And then
Hmm.
I just the way that they are created, like their innate personality.
Right. And I think, throughout the years, right? I mean, I think as a parent, I have always, um, I had an idea how I want my kids to respond, how I want my kids to behave,
Mhm.
But then you have reality, and then
Yeah,
I think,
I was gonna say, how's that working out for you?
yeah, and then so it's funny, especially like, with school. Now, both my kids, like I have no real issues outside of this house, right? They go to school, have, work, hang out with their friends, they're around other families. I never have to worry about somebody calling me and say, hey, your child said this, your child did this at all,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Now, will one of them, will my daughter test her teachers? Yeah, absolutely. And then so it's always been funny to me, like when you talk about that mirror, a reflection of yourself. When teachers will call and say, "Hey, your daughter said this or did this," and I'm thinking to myself, like, "Okay, I agree. So, how can I support you? And how do we, what do you want me to do, right? Like, how do I support you so you you can be the enforcer, the authority, and I'm supporting you, right?"
Mhm.
And then some teachers are kind of like dumbfounded by that, because I'm like, "Hey, I'm going to agree with everything that you say," because a lot of times, sometimes parents, when the teachers call, they believe the kids over the teachers. Now, I'm believe the teachers,
Mhm.
because I remember, when I was in middle school, and we didn't have, Google Classroom, we didn't have emails, we had an answer machine, a house phone, and I would run home, and I would turn that little tape replayer on the other side, so my parents never heard the messages, right? So, when I do get a phone, the time I do get a phone call from the school, I'm going to listen, because again, the kids are, like what you said, a reflection of our personalities, and some things are just innate. It's just
Mhm.
who they are, and they get it honest, as they say, right?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. I think as a parent, right, to believe that. I grew up in a guilty until proven innocent house. I'm not sure if that was the right strategy, but my parents also always believed the teacher, or whoever
Yeah.
said whatever, and it'd be like, no, really, this time I didn't do the thing,
Yeah.
right? And but I think it's about, like, how can we grow from this, right? Of
Right.
embracing, like, this is an opportunity, right?
Hmm.
Because most teachers are, I mean, they're not in it for the money. Let's be
Right.
honest. Right.
Right.
So they're in it for a different reason, which
Hmm.
would be educating our future. Right. And
Right.
so I think if they take the time to connect with you as a parent, that's
Hmm.
probably a good signal that there's an opportunity for something
Right.
here.
Yeah.
Right. There's an
Mm-hmm.
opportunity. And I think that's about embracing this change. And it's hard to imagine that this kid that you put out into the world, who
Mm-hmm.
is, sometimes we take their reflection of us a little bit too seriously, of like, like they're still making choices. They're still an
Right.
independent person. And yes, you
Mm-hmm.
may have raised them to not do that, but here we are, right? How do
Here we
we
are.
make change here?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's one of the things as you're speaking, I'm thinking of um, modeling that change with our kiddos starts with
Mhm.
ourselves. We have to realize that I don't have all the answers. I'm not going to
Yeah.
do everything right. Um, and it's a book called Shame Proof Parenting that talks about how sometimes as parents, we parent based off the shame of our own childhood, our own unresolved, you know, stressors or whatever you may call it. And then that shows up in our kids in different ways. And that sometimes also leads to an inability to change because we're trying to operate and parent from a place of shame
Yeah.
and guilt.
Mhm.
But just being, modeling, I too don't have all the answers, but
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So what other ways do you think that parents can model like a healthy mindset around change? So like I think obviously you're
Yeah.
saying accepting that you don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
That is a great place to start, right? Because our kids don't
Yeah.
have all the answers either.
Right. I think listening, right? Listening to our kids and acknowledging when, like, hey, hey, you were right, or when I did this, how to, have trying to communicate with them. Because I think one of the biggest challenges for me as a parent, as my children have become older and teenagers, the conversations have just changed and evolved. And sometimes I may get 2 minutes out of them in a day, and sometimes I may get 2 hours out of them. Depends
Yeah.
on what they want, right?
Yeah.
So it's very tangible basis. Like, hey, if they need something, all of a sudden, hey, dad, hey, father. Um, but so I think just really listening to them and letting them know that, um, acknowledging where they're right, but also surrounding yourself like your circle, right?
Mhm.
Communicating with other parents, and I think that's one of the things that I really took for granted. The power of other parents or the power of other adults who either have been there or are currently there. So therefore, you don't feel alone because I think this parenting, especially social media, that's one of my hashtags to say social media isn't real because they have this fake facade that you have to be perfect. Everything's perfect,
Mhm.
but in every single home, there's type of challenge. There's some type of struggle in every single home in America. But it just seemed to feel like, okay, my home has to be perfect. And then
Yeah.
so communicating with other parents, I think really fosters an opportunity for that change to cultivate and for you to model what change looks like because you're not really parenting in a silo. Because when you do, and I've done that, it gets hard. Even if it's a one parent home, two parent home, you can have two parents in the home and still operating in a silo, and that's difficult.
Yeah. Well, and I think things change. Like parents sometimes do get divorced, and maybe in your
Mhm.
household, maybe in other households, maybe you have to move, right? Like
Mhm.
maybe the best opportunity for your family is to move across the country, right? Like
Right,
moving away from family, moving towards family,
right.
taking a different type of job, a parent getting sick,
Mhm.
a kid getting sick. Like change
Yeah,
is inevitable. It's all happening all around us, and I think
right.
I find that having a circle of people, not just for myself, but also for my kids, to
Mhm.
say, like, here are
Yeah,
5 adults that you can go to at any time. They've agreed to
right,
be part of our family team, and they
right,
want to support you, and that you can
right.
trust those people, whether they're other parents or
Mhm.
maybe they're teachers or maybe they're family members, right, that are there to listen. And you know that, like, if your kid goes to them and there's like a crisis or danger or something, they're going to reach out to you. That's where the boundary is, right? But
Right.
otherwise, they can just say, hey,
Yeah.
this is hard, get some support. Because sometimes, I mean, as parents, I know I want to be everything to my kids,
Mhm.
but there's no way. There's no way I
No,
can't be everything to
agreed,
me. And I shouldn't be.
agreed.
They shouldn't allow me to do all the roles.
Right. Right, and that's healthy.
Yeah.
That's creating a healthy mindset, right? And it's creating a mindset of resilience. And I think one of the things that's really, I think it's a lost art, especially depending on um, a couple of different factors. One of the things that I always thought of, like, how do I teach my children resiliency? How do I teach them ability to bounce back from things? Because their struggles are not going to be my struggles, right? Because every generation is like, the thing is, you should be trying to do better than you, in a sense, you had growing up, in order to create different opportunities for the future generations,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
But with that, with success, with different opportunities, come less of those just natural challenges that, in a sense, create a natural, I would say, environment to cultivate resiliency.
Hmm.
So what does that look like in a different environment? So I think that piece has been very, very apparent to me in the last 5 years, my own kids, right? Speaking of divorce, being a single parent, raising, having two teenage children of a single dad, um, having to move a couple different times in different locations.
Yeah.
So it's like that, in a sense, was stress, something that you never thought would occur. But how do you still stay focused, stay grounded? And I think being mindful of your own stress as a parent, and how that could potentially translate over to the kiddos, regardless what age they are, and then the second, third order effect, how that can impact them as well too. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, change is inevitable. And the
Mhm.
faster resilience, just, it doesn't mean that change or stressors, the hard things don't happen. It
Mhm.
just means
Yeah.
how quickly can you bounce back from them?
Right. 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 And a lot of people, spend a lot of money learning how to bounce back. But a lot of times it's a mindset, and probably even in therapy, right? Is the mind. The mind is a powerful tool. It's a phenomenal muscle. And we have to exercise. We have to use it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and we have to have the experiences. I think,
Hmm.
unfortunately, humans learn
Hmm.
through adversity,
Yeah, that
right?
is true.
Through difficulty, which sucks.
Yes.
Super sucks, right? Because I'm like, can you just like teach me without me having to go through the thing? No, the
Yeah.
answer is no, and you just
Hmm.
can't. And I think there's something about us going through those things that really teaches us things about ourselves, about the
Right.
world, about relationships, about, what things we like and don't like. Like it
Hmm.
is so important in becoming ourselves, right? So especially in those teenage years, but even
Hmm.
in earlier childhood, like we
Yeah,
learn what we like and don't like in a friend.
that is true.
So changing friends is hard, but
Right.
you don't want to be in a friendship with somebody who doesn't treat you well, or
Right.
somebody who, disrespects your ideas or doesn't care truly about you.
Hmm.
That doesn't feel good. And yes, that change is hard, but you're learning
Right.
something really important about yourself, and
Yeah.
that helps you to kind of embrace that change of like, well,
Yeah.
I can find a friend that is like this, right? And then you find that friend and you're like, yes, like this feels so
Yeah.
good. And then you know what? That friend might move.
Hmm.
Right? And then it's like, "Oh, okay, so here I am, but I've done this before,
Yeah.
right? I
Hmm.
learned something before." And so we can
Right.
apply that ability to bounce back to this
Hmm.
next place. And so I think sometimes, I don't know if you see this, but parents often are trying to help their kids by doing all the work for them, like
Right.
solving the problems.
Right.
And there is a natural tendency
Hmm.
to want to do that. But then we kind of rob our kids from that ability to do it for themselves, which teaches them something about
Yeah.
themselves.
But I think that's learned. That's just learned through trial and error as a parent too.
Mhm.
Because I mean, there's there's no handbook for parenting. A lot of people have written books, parenting guidebooks and workbooks, but there's no one size fit all for everybody.
Yes.
Um, and I think for me, um, learning natural consequences as a parent, and even for a child, those experiences you grow from, right? And then
Mhm.
having a growth mindset even as a parent, and then how do you cultivate a growth mindset for children, and sometimes it's just allowing them to kind of fall, as long as they're falling in a safe environment. They have to fall in order to grow and develop that growth mindset.
Yeah. Will you talk about what is the definition of growth mindset? I know we talk about this a lot with kids, but like
Mhm.
sometimes parents have not experienced or talked about like what is a growth mindset really?
Yeah, so I would say in layman's term, right? Not to get into, a lot of academia and stuff, but you see resiliency, right? The ability to bounce back. So for me, a growth mindset is how is every opportunity a learning opportunity, right? Even in me in the, I would say from a professional world and as a parent, right? In the professional world, a lot of my staff always tell them, right? It's only a few things that we cannot do, right? As long as it's not unethical, illegal, or immoral, everything is okay because we're going to make mistakes. And
Mhm.
this is so instead of avoiding mistakes, actually we want to make mistakes so therefore we can learn from it. So a
Yeah.
growth mindset is how do we grow from this situation, right? So, people check. I do not check my kids' Google classrooms, right? Because the thing is, if you don't have a certain grade, you're going to get a certain result. And so when you get that certain consequence for that result, in order to grow, you have to change something. So it's not necessarily you didn't fail. It's just how do you grow from it?
Mhm.
So really cultivating that, failure actually is an option because that's how you grow. And I think, and I think this really, before I took a class in psychology, before I became a psychologist, before I even understood what growth mindset was, I never forget in college, um, my freshman year going to sophomore year, it was this one individual. He was a year older than me, and his parents academy, they had to get all A's. And this individual got like a B or a C, and he had fun a semester. But his parents ridiculed him so tough to the point he did some things that didn't allow him to come back any other semesters, right? And I
Mhm.
told myself, I never want to be in that situation to the point where I am so adamant about a grade that you don't get a chance to live life because grades come and go. Now granted, school is important. I'm not saying it's important, but I've never had a job and I've been out of high school now over 26 years. Been out of undergrad now over 20 years. I've never had anybody ask me what was my GPA in high school or in college, even my graduate school program, even my PhD program. Are you licensed? Yes. Okay. Do you have any availability? You know,
Yeah.
so the bigger things for me is how do I grow, right? And then and I'm not even in the therapy world, right? I'm not an expert in everything, right? As a generalist, I'm not an expert in everything. But the thing is, how do I continue to grow and evolve? So I try to really encourage that in my children to say, hey, you know what? And I don't always get it right as a parent, right? But when they do make mistakes, how do we grow from this?
Mhm.
I know it's an old saying, spoil the child, spare the rod, spoil the child, right? Growing up in a religion and still being religious and spiritual, but there are other ways to grow.
Mhm.
I don't want to beat growth in somebody, right? I want
Mhm.
growth to happen naturally. So for me, a growth mindset is how do we cultivate and develop a thirst for learning?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because I think these changes are going to happen, right? And so then can we learn from them, right?
Mhm.
Most change really, when I think about a lot of change, although it
Mhm.
hurts in the moment, is really pretty positive, right? Like eventually something
Yes.
good comes from it, right? I may not
Agreed.
feel that way in the moment. Like there are things that are popping into my head right now where I was like, oh, I was like, I will definitely die. I'm dead. It's
Yeah,
over, right? Like
yeah.
this having to start a new job or
Mhm,
right? Like a relationship ends, right? Like I'm like, "Ugh,
mhm,
this is the end," right? But it really
mhm.
wasn't, right?
Right.
And so I think that like there's an opportunity here is a
Yeah.
good mindset, but I like the growth mindset is really about an opportunity mindset, right? Like
Yeah.
there is something here that I
Mhm.
can grow through.
Right. Yeah, right. Grow through, right? And failure is an option,
Yeah.
because failure is just an opportunity to learn.
Mhm. Yeah, which
So
is really hard. I am like a recovering perfectionist. And so, right, like my parents didn't put much pressure, if any, on me. It was all
yeah,
internal of like, I have
mhm,
to get all A's. And you know what?
yeah,
In college, I didn't get all A's in undergraduate.
right.
And that was like, I was like, oh my gosh, my parents are going to kill me. And my parents were
Yeah,
like, hey, okay, what didn't go well? And I
right.
was like, aren't you so mad? And they're like, I mean, are you gonna do it again? right?
Yeah.
Like what didn't go well? Are you going to repeat
Yeah.
that? Then maybe we'll be mad. But if
Right.
you're like, hey, this didn't go well, here's what happened, here's how I'm going to do it better, they're like, no,
Right.
we're fine,
Right.
this is fine, you're fine, we're all
Yeah.
fine, right?
Right.
It's okay, because everybody has to suck at something
Mm-hmm.
at least once. I suck at things often.
Yeah.
I'm still learning about
Yeah.
so many things, and it's okay to just be okay at things. You don't have to be amazing at everything.
Right. It's interesting you said that, right? And it's because words matter. One of the things you said is it's okay to not be okay, right? But it's not okay to be not okay alone.
Yeah.
And then so I think we kind of get in the rut of feeling like we have to, feel alone. We have to go through life alone. We have to, learn how to change alone. And I think having a circle of people, of whatever it may be, it could be a season or for a reason or whatever it may be. But you just know that you're not alone in this thing called life.
Yeah, I love that, because I think it is. I mean, when I think isolation, right, is the
Mhm.
danger, right? Is
It
when we
is.
feel alone in
Mhm.
things. We can go
Yeah.
through, humans can endure a lot, but
Mhm.
alone, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that is, I think, too much for any of us, right? To feel like we're doing
Agreed.
it by ourselves. But that also means we have to put words to it. We have to say,
Yes.
I'm struggling. We have to
Yes.
say, I need you. And we have to
And that's
say,
hard.
mhm,
That's hard. That's hard because as humans, um, we're cultured to be able to figure it out. Because again, nowadays with social media, everything's perfect. Nobody puts on social media like, hey, you know what? I hate change, or I'm sucking at being a parent. No, nobody puts that on social media. Everybody's like, hey, look at all the great things that I'm doing, right? Because we want the accolades, right? We want that. I, I like to use Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We're looking for that love and that to love and to be loved. And unfortunately, a lot of people use like or shares as a measure of being loved, and that's unfortunate.
yeah, because it's not real, right? Like, those
Not
people are not going to show up at midnight or at
no,
2 a.m. to help you
no.
out with something, help you solve a problem, right? It does not
Right.
matter how many followers you have. Like, I think, especially teens these days, like the in-person
Hmm.
relationships where you're really together doing
Right.
something, right? Not being on your phone, like
Hmm.
actually doing something. That's why I love sports, is
Yeah.
because in sports, you can't be on your phone.
Right.
You have to actually be doing the thing, right? And so
Agreed.
it doesn't give you an option to do that. So, like,
Hmm.
even my kids who are not great at sports, which is
Hmm.
totally fine, I still want
Hmm.
them to be involved in an
Right.
activity like that, because I want them to be in something where they feel like
Right.
they have a purpose and a connection with people. And it's all in person. So, like, even if in our house we're not doing phones until our kids are older, but
Okay.
that we're creating a setting where those other kids could have
Mhm.
phones, right?
Right.
Fine, right? But they can't have them during basketball practice. They
Hmm.
can't have them during taekwondo. They can't have them
Yeah.
while they're playing the piano, right? Like, because you can't do both of those things. And so, like, that helps to give that real connection to other
Right.
people,
Yeah.
which I think
And
is,
connection. Yeah. Connections matter. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
oh, you're totally fine. I mean, I agree. Second
Yeah.
that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so is there words? I mean, we just talked about how important words are, right? Our language around things. Is there words or language that we can help to normalize change or the anxiety that comes with change for our kids?
Yeah. So I think, you know, put in words to observations,
Mhm.
something that I'm learning how to do with my own kids. I notice, that you're a little bit more quiet, or I notice that you stand in your room. Is everything okay?
Mhm.
Trying to name what you see, and also start with myself, right? Putting words to what I'm feeling,
Yeah.
and the behavior. And then so I think that has been helpful for me. I don't, again, it's not always perfect, because I reference my 15-year-old daughter a lot because listen,
Kids are
it
easier to grow. Yes.
in more ways than one. Um, She says, "Dad, have you always been bald?" I said, "No, just when you was born." Um, because I used to love my hair. I had waves the whole nine. I was like, but ever since she was born, November 2009, for some reason my hair stopped growing. But yeah, I think that's something that I'm working on. Is to put where, especially as they're getting older, and then like my son, it's interesting because when he was much younger, he was a whole lot more verbal with expressing his feelings and emotion and his thoughts. Now he's too cool to talk about what he's feeling, right? So that's a whole nother shift. But sometimes the words is just space. Give them the space to let them process things and figure things out. And then you talked about earlier how sometimes as a parent trying to solve things, sometimes being overly verbal in a sense hinders them processing what they're experiencing in the moment. And that's something here more recently that I've had to learn. Like, I put my daughter on a consequence last week. And I had to not go back and forth with her, just be quiet, let her figure it out. And although I wanted the consequence to end earlier, it was harder for me for her to be on consequence than probably for her. But I had to just give the space, let her be upset. I even had to process my own internal feelings that I was feeling because, that's my baby girl. So I think naming what you see, observations, but also sometimes just giving quietness an opportunity to do the talking as well too.
Yeah. I mean, that's so wise because I do think that the quietness, sometimes they're contemplating what they want to say. Like you ask a question and they don't immediately respond.
Mhm.
I think, sometimes it's been a minute. You might be like, I just want to make sure you heard the thing I said,
Right.
because, sometimes they're like, what? And it's
Mhm.
like, oh, okay. I was waiting for this really profound response and you didn't even hear what I said.
Right.
But I think mostly it's just like giving them the space to do that. And they may not want to do that in front of you. They may
Right.
go off and think about it and then come back. And you
Mhm.
can follow up on conversations to say like, hey, I know I presented this to you. I noticed that you spend more time in your room and I asked if everything was okay. And you just kind of like brush it off like, yeah. And you left. I just want to follow back up on that conversation
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
see if there's any thoughts that you had, right? And they may say no. Okay, you can still notice that, right? Like
Right.
you can still keep space for that. Just because
Mhm.
it's no right now or they're not wanting to talk right now doesn't mean they don't want to talk later. And
Right.
I find that sometimes it's like going for a walk. Do you ever take your kids on a walk?
Not necessarily now as teenagers.
Mhm.
When they were much younger, oh my God, we always were going walking or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, but now it's more, going for a drive. Like, okay,
Yes.
you want to, teaching them how to drive. One's is, my 17-year-old. I mean, we can get in the car, we can go. But my 15-year-old, now that's her opportunity to say, hey, let's go for a drive. And because then
Mhm.
when she has to be more attention, she has to be more focused, and therefore we can also have different conversations. So those walks have now turned into driving vehicles.
Yes. Yes. Well, but it's spending that time when you don't have to like look at somebody. There's something
Yeah.
about that intense eye contact when
Yeah.
you're like, that seems to shut things down,
Yeah.
right? So it's more that the lack of eye contact maybe opens it up a little bit. Not
Yeah.
always. I mean, it's not a perfect system, but it kind of creates that opportunity. And
Mhm.
sometimes I like to just ask my kids questions of like, what do you really wish I knew about you? Or what do you think most people don't
Hmm.
understand?
Yeah. Those are great questions. I'm actually gonna, use that myself, right? What is something you wish I knew about you? Um, and also I've used some different little journals, right? Like dad-daughter journals,
Yes.
dad-son journals. And you kind of go back and forth.
Mhm.
Sometimes I think it's cringy, but don't expect something. I didn't expect something right back, but after a couple days or a week or two, I may get it back with their
Mhm.
writing assignment, and then I'll give it back and have to wait a couple more days or a week or two. And that's another way to kind of understand their language. Um, Another thing that I do is I purposely see some teens in therapy, so therefore I can just understand the lingo, I understand
Mhm.
the latest slang. So
Your cheat
therefore,
code.
Yeah, right. So then I go back and I start communicating there in their code, and it's like, how do you know that, right?
Yeah.
I show up to their school events, and and I'm always I'm always communicating. So therefore, I'm always, learning their language, and I'm always just sometimes being present goes a long way, and that's also
Yeah.
another way to communicate that you're there and available.
Like showing up. I think the
Yeah,
power of showing up is it speaks volumes, right?
it
Our
does.
words might be one thing, but like
Mhm.
our actions matter
Right.
tremendously.
And how
Yeah.
consistent are those actions?
Mhm.
Consistency is key, you know.
Yeah. Yes. So I think, yeah, it's about showing up and just normalizing. Like, it's okay to
Mhm.
be scared. I'm
Yeah.
scared. There's things that still scare me, right?
Mhm.
And there are things that make me worried.
Mhm.
Um, and talking about those to just normalize that change is
Mhm.
hard. And about 4 years ago, we moved, and the move was in some ways positive and in
Mhm.
some ways hard because it was
Mhm.
in result to my mom passing away, and
Mm.
so that changed some things for us. But my kids were anxious about that, and it's
Mhm.
like it's totally normal to be anxious about
Mhm.
this, right? Like, and it is sad, but it is
Mhm.
also okay, right? Like, we're gonna
Right.
make it through this, and there's
Right.
good that can come from this. And I think that taking those challenges, even in our own lives, to say to our
Mhm.
kids, like, this is hard, but
Right.
we can get through it together.
Right.
Or this is really exciting, and
Mhm.
how you might feel about that. But like, maybe I feel excited, but you feel sad. And that's
Yeah.
both.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, unexpected changes, like a move, that uproots what they're familiar with,
Mhm.
But so communicating with them along the way, I think when my kids are 15 and 17, they've lived in, let's see, one was born in Alabama, one was born in Wisconsin, lived in Texas, Alaska, Texas again, California, Florida, um, and now back to California, right? Because a period of time, my kids being military kids, they're used to moving, right?
Mhm.
For so long, and now being in high school, like I think this is the longest period in one place that my kids have been. So we've been here what over 4 years now.
Mhm.
This is the longest that they've been in one place now, and then so starting to see it now because my daughter's ninth grade going to 10th grade. So do we potentially stay here her last 2 years, or do we move again? So we will stay to my son graduate. The reason why we stayed a little longer, so he can have one high school experience, where my daughter's kind of like, well, she say that she wants to move, but then again she does want to move because all her friends are here, right? So changing when children are a little younger, it's a little bit, I think, a little bit more easy. It's more easier and doable because they're like sponges. They find new friends, right? Oh, it's my best friend. They're like, what's
Yes.
their name? I don't know. Um, but when they get older, that's when those peer groups really start to develop and their identities really start to develop. Um, and then so that's another big change. So like even right now we're having a conversation like, hey, do you want to graduate at this high school? If so, I'm gonna do some things so therefore we can stay here a little bit longer. And eventually I'll retire. And then that'll be a permanent home wherever I decide to retire at. So
Yeah.
having that conversation. So my son was part of that process for me. I was like, hey, you want to stay here and graduate? He was like, yes. So, I did what I need to do so he can stay, one high school all 4 years. So
Yeah.
so involving them, depending on their age, especially their teenagers, involving them in that conversation as much as possible.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and some parts are, it's not possible, right? Like, for
Mm.
them to be involved, but then there are times where it's like, okay, we have to move, but
Right,
here's an apartment that we can live in, or here's an apartment we can live in, or
right.
we can be, where we have family in this town, or we could be 20 minutes away from them, right? Like,
Mm.
there are some ways that we can allow them control, right? And it's
Right.
okay do that, to put that in, or like, let's put your vote in, right?
Mhm.
Ultimately, as a parent, I'm going to decide, but like vote, right? Because
Right.
that helps me to understand, and like, let's talk about why this might be important. That may not happen,
Right.
but let's converse about this, and then I'm going to make the best decision for our family, right?
Right.
Which is, I mean, a lot of pressure. Sometimes I'm like, can somebody else come in, an adult here, right? Like, I'll tap out for a minute.
Yes. When you find that number, let me know because I'm calling too.
Yes, I know. I'm looking for a hotline. Have not found them. There's no parent drop off either. I've been looking for
Man.
that, where it's like, if you're having a rough time, like where you drop
Right.
off parents, people tell me
Right.
it's a bar or a
Right.
massage place, and I'm like, yeah, that's not
Yeah.
what I'm
No.
looking for,
No.
right?
No.
Like, you just don't get
Yeah.
this. Like, sometimes I just need I just
I
need
need
a
adult respite. I need. I'm looking
yes,
for. I'm looking for a good home. Looking. Just give me a room or a
yes,
cot. Nah, just
yes.
72 hours of just quietness. I'll be okay.
Yes, right? And then I'll go back, right? I don't wanna
Yeah.
totally leave.
Yeah.
I
No.
just need a break, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, because it's hard. Um,
Mhm.
are there skills that you think, or habits that we can teach kids to make them
Mhm.
more resilient, or help them to really gravitate towards resiliency?
Yeah, so I like the fact that so I'm a big sports guy, right? I played sports my whole entire life, and
Mhm.
I think sports was a catalyst of me developing some resiliency and change,
Yeah.
um, because you're not going to win every single game, but how do you bounce back?
Yes.
And how do you get better? It's
Mhm.
one thing. How do you get 1% better every single day? And then so from a sports perspective, I think how do you, as parents, how do we help our children compete? And
Mhm.
compete against themselves, right? Not against the world, not against, their siblings, not against their peer group, but how do we foster competition within ourselves? How do we just get better? And
Mhm.
whatever that better looks like internally.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think, I'm always a big proponent of sports. And again, uh, no knock on those who are not, athletically inclined. And you don't have to be athletically inclined, but just
Mhm.
aren't into sports. Hey, I get it. You need to do something outside of the regular just school, right?
Mhm.
Because I think that creates a sense of confidence, right? Whether it's even just riding a bike. One of the things you know, as I look back on, um, teaching my kids how to learn to ride a bike without training wheels at a very early age, that instilled confidence,
Yes.
because, you know, I look at Erickson's psychosocial stages of development. I don't remember it by heart, but I remember trust versus mistrust, right? Can I trust these adults to lead me in the right direction, right? So, hey, here I am 4 years old, learning how 33 or 4 years old, learning how to ride a bike without training wheels on anymore, right? That is a big thing where it boosts the confidence. Teaching
Mhm.
kids how to read at an early age. So therefore, when they're in pre-K and kindergarten around their peers, they're not fumbling over words, right? Because, when that happens, it's a lack of confidence that can have other ripple effects on their self-esteem, their ability to socialize with other kids.
Sure.
Um, so I think the earlier you can instill or invoke or create some type of confidence and independence in children, I think can help lay the foundation for change later on as they
Mhm.
continue to develop. So I
Mhm.
would say confidence, right? And independence. How do we create that at an early age? The earlier, the better.
Yeah. Yeah, and that doesn't mean that we're not there to support them. That
Right,
doesn't mean that, we're not gonna make them breakfast
right,
sometimes, right? But them being able to
right.
do those skills by themselves, they feel really proud. Like, my
Yes.
daughter can make pancakes by herself, and she, like, tells everybody how she's the pancake queen, self-proclaimed, but I love
Yeah.
it because
Yeah.
it's super cool, because she was like, then her siblings, the younger ones, are like, "Oh, yeah, she can make us Mickey pancakes," and
Mhm.
she, like, laughs because she's like, "They don't look very good." But I'm like, "It doesn't matter. They're super
Doesn't matter.
impressive." Right? It
Mhm.
doesn't matter. You're trying, and the more you do it, the better you'll get, and that's all that
Exactly.
matters, is just the
Right,
effort, right? To try.
right,
You don't have to be great at everything, and I'm trying
right,
to also instill that in my kids, of like, just trying matters
right.
so much.
Goes a
Trying a
long way.
trying a new activity,
Mhm.
meeting a new friend, right? Doing
Right.
something you think you won't like, you might find the perfect job for you, might find the perfect
Mhm.
friend for you, might find
Mhm.
something really great just by trying,
Right.
which is hard because I think oftentimes we want to be great at everything we do, but that's not
Right.
how you become great.
No, right? And that it goes back to the growth mindset,
Yes.
and learning,
Mhm.
so and you fall down, would be a skateboard, skates, um, rollerblading, whatever it may be, a lot it's like, hey, it's okay, you know, we're going to fall down, but how do we get back up, and then so whatever it may be, I think, again, instilling that confidence and sense of independence or agency, right?
Mhm.
It really goes a long way for kids, the ability to um, embrace change.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I was thinking about with the confidence, like oftentimes parents will say like, "Oh, sports especially, like you had such a great game today, right? Like I was really proud of you," which is
Hmm.
great. Keep doing that
Hmm.
piece. But I think the
Right.
other piece I would encourage parents to do is asking kids how they felt about it. Right.
Yeah.
So the kids are like, I had a great game today, right?
Hmm.
It's like, I thought you did great. How did you feel about how you
Right.
or it doesn't really matter how I felt. I'm curious about how you felt.
Agreed. Or encouraging them, say, you know what, you do this real good, but right here you kind of struggle. How about you work on this? You
Hmm.
know, and then after that, checking on how did it feel, or if you didn't do that, why is that? What were you feeling? What were you thinking?
Hmm.
And then that creates like, okay, this is something I can work on. Or
Yeah.
sometimes you got to be a little bit more forceful with it, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and I never forget, my daughter played high school basketball. This is her first year. She played varsity, and she's a decent athlete. She was the number one freshman scorer in the state of California. But it
It's
got to
yes. Yes.
I, I told the coach one game, I was like, hey, the team was a subpar team that we were playing against, and they were up by. I said, listen, if she scores another layup, I told him at halftime, I said, make her go left, make her use her left hand, and if she doesn't, tell her you're going to put her on the bench, and I never forget, she did the right, and the coach said, hey, we'll put you on the bench and you'll start using your left. He's like, you talk to my dad? And he just said, yes. Um, but guess what? She started using her left hand, right? She didn't want
Yeah.
to come out the game. Sometimes you have to, some of those strong-willed children, you
Mhm.
have to kind of use a little force, creative force, to help them learn as well too.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and that change, again, that's embracing change, right? Like,
Mhm.
that opportunity to use her left hand is
Yeah.
change because that's not probably her dominant hand. That's not what
Right.
she feels the most confident with,
Right.
right? But being able to
Mhm.
go left or right is invaluable,
Exactly.
right? Because especially in sports, that you don't know where they're gonna go, and that makes
Exactly.
you a fierce to be reckoned with in terms of an athlete, right? Like, when you can do
Exactly.
both, I mean, you're unstoppable, which is amazing.
Yes.
So I think sometimes we do need to be pushed. And me too. Right.
Yeah.
Like it's like, I know I'm really good at this. I want to keep doing this. And then when my husband's like, oh, you're really good at that. How about this? And it's like, oh
Yeah.
no, I'm bad at that. He's like, how about that? Right. I'll be like, what
Yeah.
do you want for dinner? And he'll be like, something that I don't know how to cook. And I'm like, I don't know how to make that. And he was
Yeah.
like, I bet you can do it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
damn right, I can do that. Right. Like, and
Exactly.
then I'm like, yes, I can. I'm gonna get
Yeah.
this down. Right. And then
Right.
it's like, I want his feedback. I want him to be
Right.
like, oh, it was okay, right?
Yeah.
Or really great, or like, I wonder if it was like this, or what if that.
Mhm.
I'm like, I like that because then I
Mhm.
feel like, okay, I really did it. It's not just
Mhm.
like, oh, that was good, and then we're
Right.
over with it. It's like, would you eat it again? If
Mhm.
you say no, I want to know why and like what
Yeah.
we can do to improve it. So I think we
Yeah.
do want to be challenged, right?
Yeah,
And
we
I think
do.
also we don't want to be challenged all the time in everything
Mhm.
we're doing, right? Like we also need space to kind of coast or feel good
Right.
about too much change or too many
Mhm.
things coming at us at one time can feel very overwhelming and kind of hopeless. But I think it's
Yeah.
also right, our consistent, we may not be able to change, like control the changes that are happening around. Like we have to move, or our
Right.
friendship group changes, or we don't
Mhm.
make the team we imagined, or whatever. But
Mhm.
you can be the consistent piece, right?
Yeah.
Like you can be the consistency in the storm too. It doesn't always have to be that you're controlling anything on the outside, but
Right.
sometimes we do need to challenge our kids. I like that you kind of put some push in there on that coach to be like, hey, force her to grow, right?
Right.
Like encourage her to do this. This is a good
Yeah.
opportunity. She can handle it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree with it. And again,
Yeah.
having those relationships too with that circle, right? Because if I didn't have a relationship with the coach, he's not gonna listen to me because I'm not the type of parent who's coaching my kid from the sideline. Like I'm not
Yeah.
gonna say anything, you know.
Mhm.
But having those relationships, as a parent, relationship with other parents and other individuals who have influence over your children matter.
Yeah. Yeah. So how's her left hand coming?
Oh yeah, she I mean she can go left, trust me.
Good.
She can go left, so yeah. Yeah, because she hates coming out the game. I don't care if it's
Yes. Yes. And that's where stubbornness really comes into play, where it's so valuable, right? Like it
Mhm.
can both be our greatest quality and worst enemy if we're not willing to do the work, right? If we're not willing to do what it takes to stay in there.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about the average kid struggling, right? What if it's too much, right? Like how do we know when change or challenge is too much, and what
Yeah.
should we do about that in response as parents?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question. I think when children are not acting their normal self, and whatever their normal self is, that could be a sign. When children start acting out, right? Now you have normal acting out that teenagers will do or children will do. But then you have some things that is just this is not the norm, or if it's consistent, not the norm. Um, One, start to have a conversation about it. I think when you ignore it for so long, I mean, it's like, okay, everything's okay, it's not really an issue, or how do I overcompensate, right? Like,
Mhm.
okay, give more and do more. That only makes the situation worse. At the end of the day, I think you know I, I'm a proponent of therapy. But I always say that therapy doesn't always have to be with a licensed professional,
Sure.
because that's when it becomes more of impairing, right? I always try to explain to people, like, I know that we've commercialized pathology so much. I think that's why waiting lists are the way that they are, because everybody needs therapy. No, you don't.
Mhm.
You need a friend. You need
Yeah.
you need clergy, whether it be a spiritual or religious thing, or you need community involved. If you need to get involved, you need connection. And a lot of times people use therapy as a replacement for connection, unfortunately.
Mhm.
However, some kids, they need to be able to have an opportunity, but they don't have that connection. If they can't get it with their parents, they can't get it with an adult figure at school, whether it be the school counselor or teacher, a family member, somebody in the religious organization.
Mhm.
They maybe talking to a therapist. And I think um, certain states, it's different rules, right? When a kid is 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, yeah, a parent can take them to therapy, but not
Sure.
necessarily, it doesn't mean that the kid's going to talk in therapy. And then when
Sure.
kids become a little bit older, right, they're like, they actually, you can't force them to do therapy.
Mhm.
So many times, I've had parents reach out, try to get their 16, 17-year-old child to do therapy. Like, they actually, based off state laws, they can refuse. They don't have to, right? Um, and that sometimes that is shocking for parents. And then you just want to make sure that they have a safe space.
Yeah.
And whatever that safe space that you could create for them, whatever that looks like, you have to create it because they need that safe space. And you have to, you know, so yeah, so that's what I wholeheartedly recommend, is observing some of those um, abnormal signs,
Yeah.
and things when they're consistently abnormal, but then get them in therapy if they need to.
Yeah. Well, and I think trusting your parent gut, right? Like, I
Mhm.
think as a therapist myself, like, I know that every parent knows more about their kid than I do. Not that I don't know the clinical side of what your kid's going through, right?
Right.
Or the developmental part, but your kid
Mhm.
specifically is known more
Right.
closely by you. So if
Right.
your parental gut is saying something's not right here, trust yourself.
Right.
Right? I mean, that doesn't
Mhm.
mean hospitalize your kid, right? That
Right.
means get curious about what is going on. Like something
Right.
just doesn't feel right. Like I want
Right.
to understand. I want to know more. You talked about earlier about like planned silence, right? Like being quiet,
Mhm.
sometimes that initiates a conversation. You may not say anything, but you're just together doing something
Right.
collaboratively, right? And it's like they just start talking. I've had so
Mhm.
many kids who just say stuff because there's silence and it's on their heart, it's on their mind. They want to tell
Mhm.
you, right? But it's also about like, how will my parent receive this information, right?
Right.
So being a good listener, active listener,
Yeah.
curious, not judgmental, right? Those things help.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important to be mindful of how you show up,
Hmm.
because kids are observing it. They may not tell us everything, but
Yeah.
if you're constantly, whether it be emotionally unavailable, mentally unavailable, spiritually unavailable, when they need you to be available, they
Yeah.
won't they won't come to you.
Hmm. So true, right? So I think, yeah, this parenting job, way harder than anyone ever told us about, right? They did not tell us what we would be coming up against, but
No.
at the same time, it's beautiful, right?
Yeah,
It is
it
hard
is.
and both challenging to us as people, but
Mhm.
also like so rewarding too. And I think we're growing in this.
Yes.
Anybody who is stagnant as a parent, I don't think you're doing it right.
Right.
I mean, I'm not very judgmental to parents. Honestly, I
Yeah.
think everybody's doing the best job that they can. I've never met
Yeah.
a parent who was not doing the best job that they could.
Right.
It may not be maybe enough from society's viewpoint, but I think they're doing
Mhm.
the best that they can. But I
Yeah.
think, if you're not growing, I don't know
Mhm.
if you're parenting. I don't know what that's called, because as a parent, I feel like this journey has been harder than all of the degrees that I have. All the papers that I've written, all the exams, all the boards I've taken, right? Like the parenting
Yeah.
part is way harder
Way
because
hard.
it is on the fly. You're
Mhm.
being challenged, right? Like you think you
Yeah.
got it, and then
Right.
it pivots, right? It
Yeah.
goes a different
Yeah.
direction. You're like, dang it, I just had this.
Yeah.
And that's like when I
Yeah.
know it's going to change.
Yeah. It's kind of like the accrediting body, right? Our kids are our accrediting body, and
Yes.
sometimes they come in for an inspection, and we don't pass every inspection.
Yes.
They take our accreditation away from us.
Yeah. They're like, you got to earn this back. Yes. So true. So true. Thank you, Dr. Darnell. This has been such a great conversation. I so appreciate your thoughts.
No, I appreciate you.
Thanks again, Dr. Darnell. What an awesome conversation. I know that it is inevitable that change is going to happen, and us being there to support our kids is such an important part. Thank you so much for your thoughts and feedback on this topic. I hope that you all are leaving with more information about this than you started, and a feeling of confidence in allowing our kids to experience hard and supporting them in that process. With that, I will say thank you so much for your time today. Please like and subscribe to our show. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And if you have a topic suggestion for us, please email us to accidentalexperts@gmail.com. Have a fantastic day.
Some words from our legal team.
The information presented in this podcast is not intended or implied to be a substitute for appropriate professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. All content, including text, graphics, images, and information contained on or available through this podcast, is for general information purposes only. This podcast makes no representations and assumes no responsibility for the accuracy or information on or available through this podcast, and such information is subject to change without notice. You are encouraged to confirm any information obtained through this program with other sources and review all information regarding any condition or treatment with the appropriate professionals.
What we're saying is, yes, I am a real therapist, but I'm not your therapist.